Hello and welcome to my video, where I'm going to show you how to make your own patch using simple embroidery. These are ideal for sewing onto bags or clothing that are made of quite sturdy fabrics like denim or canvas. I've chosen a geometric design for this patch, so it's a straightforward design to embroider and is good for beginners. Obviously, if you're an embroidery pro, you can create something far more advanced. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to transfer the design, how to embroider it using satin stitch, and then how to sew it onto your jeans. In order to follow along, you're going to need some embroidery floss, a piece of woven fabric, an embroidery hoop, a disappearing or magic fabric pen, a pair of scissors, a ruler, some drawing materials or computer and printer, an embroidery needle, a hand sewing needle and thread, a light box or window, or supplies for a different transfer method, sewing pins, and clothing you're going to sew the patch onto. For the embroidery floss, I'm going to use a few shades of purple, plus a blue that kind of matches my jeans. And for the woven fabric, I'm going to use calico, but linen, cotton, or similar would work as long as it's not too flimsy. If you're going to be washing the item you're adding the patch to, pre-wash this fabric first. Okay, so the first step is to transfer the image. If your fabric is light enough in colour, like mine, you'll be able to do this using a light box or a window. Otherwise, you may need to use transfer paper or another transfer technique. You can create your own design like I did, or you can use mine, or find something else online. I'll leave a link in the description box below to where you can find my design for free. To use a light box, you simply plug it in, put the printed out design on top, then the woven fabric right side up on top of that, and then use a disappearing or magic fabric pen to trace over the outline. Note that as well as printing out the outline, I also printed out the full colour image, and I kept that to hand throughout the process so I could see where I needed to add each colour. Once you've done that, place the fabric in the embroidery hoop. Make sure the image is centered and the fabric is taut. Then refer to the full colour image to know where you need to use each colour of thread. I started with the lightest colour of thread, and I began by drawing a line wherever I needed to add that colour. This just makes it easier for you to not put the wrong colour in the wrong place. It's also a good idea to mark the angle at which you want your thread strands to lie within the design. Begin by cutting an arm's length of thread, or less, from your skein. Split this thread in half so you have two lengths, each consisting of 3 individual strands. Feed one length of 3 strands into your embroidery needle, and tie a knot at the other end. Bring the needle up through the fabric on the outline where you want to begin. Then go straight across to the opposite side of the area you want to cover, and go back down through the outline. Then repeat this over and over, always keeping an eye on how you want to angle these threads. My image is very geometric and has a 3D effect, so it's important that I get the angles correct to achieve that effect. I aimed to have the strands lie within the appropriate plane and be angled towards the centre of the shape. You may find it easier to stitch many individual strands with gaps in between, and then go back to fill in the gaps. This helps you to maintain the angle of the thread. However, I personally prefer to draw lines instead to show me the angle I need for my stitches. The idea is to create a solid block of colour. This is called satin stitch. Once you come to the end of a strand of thread, make sure you secure it. I do this by taking the needle under the back of a few nearby strands, pulling the thread until there's just a small loop remaining, taking the needle through that loop once or twice, and then pulling tight. I usually repeat this again to make sure. Then just keep embroidering with a new piece of thread as before. Make sure that throughout this the fabric stays taut. You might need to occasionally tighten the hoop. Continue with satin stitch, one colour at a time, marking out where you need to add the colour first, as well as marking out the angle of the stitches. And here you can now see that I've completed the 3 shades of purple. Next, in order to maintain the effect of a cube framework design, I filled the gaps between the purple areas with a shade of thread as close to my jeans colour as possible. Note that I did this with satin stitch again, and I lined up the strands in straight lines following the planes at the back and the base of the shape, i.e. vertical at the back and more horizontal at the base. If you want to add a border in this same colour, or in a different contrast colour, feel free to do that now. Many traditional patches have a band of colour around the outside to make it pop and stand out more. I didn't want to do this because I wanted the effect of the patch to look more integrated into the jeans, and I thought having a border would distract from the 3D effect I wanted. Then remove the patch from the hoop and cut off the excess fabric around the outside to leave a border of about 1 centimetre. And then you should have something a bit like this. Fold this border to the back and use a hand sewing needle and thread to sew the edges down onto the back of the patch. Make sure you only stitch on the back and those stitches don't come through to the front. I used whip stitch to do this. You basically just go down into the patch and up through the border in the same direction every stitch. All you're trying to do is fix the border in place, and you want to try and hide all of the fabric behind the patch. Once you've done that, it's then time to attach this patch to your clothing. I initially tried to use fusible web and an iron to stick the patch on first, but I think the patch must be too thick for that to work, so I just kept it in position with sewing pins instead. Once you're happy with the position, use invisible stitch, also called ladder stitch, to attach the patch to your jeans. Invisible stitches lie parallel to the edge of the patch, and you basically go into the jeans and go straight across and stitch into the patch, and repeat this all the way along. Then go straight across and stitch into the jeans. Straight across into the patch, and so on along the edge. When you stitch into the jeans, try and do this as close to the edge of the patch as possible. And when you stitch into the patch, try and overlap with the embroidery very slightly. This will help to ensure the fabric edges of the patch will be hidden from view. You don't want a gap between the embroidery and the jeans. Then secure the thread and hide the end under the patch. You'll see that there is one small area where I didn't quite manage to hide the edge of the fabric, but I'm still very pleased with the result. And that's it, the patch is now fixed in place. I really hope you enjoyed this project, and thank you very much for watching.